This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
So we must finish at 5. Your next task, rather like Mrs. Beaton and Hare's, is to find the reception that you will then enjoy, I hope, because the reception is not going to be down here, it's on the second floor. So you need to take the lift up to the second floor or walk to the second floor where the foyer before the Institute of Commonwealth Studies and follow the signs there to the reception. But I do hope that everyone will come to that because the Secretary General will be speaking there and you will also be enjoying a well-earned drink. I do also want to take the chance, because the Roundtable has jointly organised this conference with the Commonwealth Advisory Bureau, but I have to admit that the bulk of the work has been done by CAB, and I do want to thank Daisy in particular, who I've worked with on the programme, but also others in her team, Stephanie, who's at the back there, who's been gliding backwards and forwards here, making sure that everything works well, and Rob and Olga and so on, have done a really fantastic job, and I want to thank our partners in that respect. Now we have just about 10 minutes with the benefit of Sir Ron Sanders to reflect. Now Ron is well known to you, and I'm not going to, his CV is there, I'm not going to go through that CV for you. But one thing, of course, in particular that Ron has done has been an intrinsic part of the Eminent Persons Group and their whole reporting process. Indeed, has done a huge amount of the writing and the rapporteur work involved in that report, and has been a great advocate for that work. And so I think it's going to be particularly interesting to hear not a summary of the day in any sense from him, because I think that would be unfair to ask him to do that, but a reflection on some of the issues that we've discussed today, and his own reflection on whether indeed we are a Commonwealth in crisis and whether reform is possible. So over to you, Ron.
Thank you, Stuart. I know that I stand between you and drinks and going home to dinner and loved ones, so I will try to be as brief as I can in all of this. I think I should start by saying that I believe all will agree that this has been an extremely dynamic and thought-provoking day. In various ways, all the participants have ably tackled both the statement and the question posed by the seminar. The statement, the Commonwealth in crisis. The question, is reform possible? One of our very respected and knowledgeable speakers questioned whether the Commonwealth is in crisis. Well, the facts should speak for themselves. 70% of the Commonwealth Secretariat's budget is funded by only 3 of its member countries. The other 50 or so are reluctant to increase their contributions to an organization everybody says is of great value to them. More than 30 of the 54 member states are in arrears of their contributions. The Secretariat needs at least another £2 million per annum if it is to carry out the mandates it now has before it. Good staff are leaving the Secretariat, and it cannot attract better personnel because of its wage structure. A kind of north-south divide has developed in decision-making that has led to unease in relations. There are governments that are reluctant to attend a Chogam because of concerns over violations of Commonwealth values by the proposed host country. There is a general lack of knowledge about the Commonwealth in its member states, and the majority of its governments are doing little or nothing to explain it or promote it. The media consider it to be of such little relevance that it gets little coverage. That sounds like a crisis to me, and one that it would be helpful to confront and not ignore. It is interesting that this event coincided today with the release of the report of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the British House of Commons on the role and future of the Commonwealth. Now, anyone who participated in today's event and has had the opportunity to peruse the report of the Foreign Affairs Committee would be struck by the similarity of the sentiments that they share. Those sentiments are a firm belief in the potential of the Commonwealth, considerable anguish over its present situation, and a strong conviction that it urgently needs reform before it can fulfill its potential as a unique multinational association of governments and people capable of making a difference to their own circumstances and contributing to the resolution of problems faced by the global community. Now let me say how pleased I am that the Foreign Affairs Committee has endorsed and supported the report and recommendations of the Eminent Persons Group, of which Senator Hugh Segal and I were members. It is a sad commentary on the Commonwealth that a year after the EPG report was discussed at Perth, even the recommendations that were accepted are still to be implemented. We should not confuse adoption for implementation. That is motion without movement. For me, it is a tragedy that while climate change and global warming manifest themselves every day with worrying consequences, particularly for small island states, and my distinguished sister from Jamaica will testify to what it did to Jamaica yet again this year, the EPG's specific recommendation that immediately after Perth an expert group should be convened to produce a study that would identify the most vulnerable countries, identify and cost their urgent adaptation needs, and suggest ways for financing and implementation remain to be addressed. It is also an inexplicable curiosity that while the Doha round of trade negotiations at the World Trade Organization remains stalled and in urgent need of advancement, it is claimed that the EPG recommendation to convene a meeting of Commonwealth trade ministers to explore ways in which a Commonwealth consensus might remove the logjam has been overtaken by events. Precisely what events have overtaken this recommendation has not been explained. But the Commonwealth has lost an opportunity to utilize the uniqueness of its membership to at least try to make a difference to a global situation that cries out for the kind of common approach that the Commonwealth's diverse membership can bring. On the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, CMAG, and the Secretary General's Good Office's role, there is no doubt that the expanded mandate that CMAG itself recommended is a long overdue step in the right direction. It is also a most welcome decision to include among the triggers for CMAG action recommendations from the Secretary General on issues such as the unilateral abrogation of a democratic constitution, the postponement of national elections, the systematic denial of political space, such as through detention of political leaders or restriction of freedom of association. But in its self-reform process, CMAG showed itself to be more concerned that it should protect itself from being seen as a punitive body than with refining its system and capacity for dealing with serious or persistent violations of Commonwealth values. I suspect, in the view of many Commonwealth observers, this is the fundamental weakness of CMAG, a resistance of the very role for which it was devised, and that is to be a body that applies appropriate penalties to those states that persistently or seriously violate the rules for which all Commonwealth members claim to stand. Now, the enhanced role of the Secretary General in addressing serious or persistent violations of Commonwealth values, other than the unconstitutional overthrow of a democratically elected government, and acting to help such a government to restore Commonwealth values is also a welcome development. But a line has to be drawn between giving a country time to institute restorative measures that can be gauged and simply biding time to keep countries in the Commonwealth at all costs. If there is too much of the latter and not enough of the former, the Commonwealth Association and its capacity to be an influence for good will be lost. It also has to be said that this new mandate to CMAG and the Secretary General's good offices could quickly become a point of greater criticism of them both, unless they are seen and heard to be addressing clear violations. The Secretariat, led by the Secretary General, should be actively shaping the consensus of Commonwealth member states and raising the bar around upholding the values of the Commonwealth. That is why in the EPG report we stated clearly that silence is not an option. And we recommended that the Secretary General, as the voice of the Commonwealth and as a leader on behalf of the organisation, should have the freedom, autonomy and responsibility to speak out publicly in defence of Commonwealth values. What is certain now is that there is no effective system in place to give early warning of problems in member states on the basis of well-researched and reliable information of serious or persistent violations of democracy, the rule of law and human rights. Filling that gap was one of the reasons that the EPG recommended a Commissioner for Democracy, the rule of law and human rights. There, of course, has been much quibbling over the name, but a rose by any other name, I understand, still smells as sweet. Now, we all know that the EPG recommendations for a Commissioner was rejected by a number of governments. But I've been heartened by the discussion throughout today that still sees value in that recommendation. And I am glad of the observation in the Foreign Affairs Committee report that the intention behind the recommendation for a Commissioner is an important one and goes to the heart of what the Commonwealth is all about. We all had continued to hope that a mechanism would emerge that, in the words of the committee's report, reflects the EPG's recommendation that the Commissioner should provide well-researched and reliable information on serious or persistent violations of democracy, the rule of law and human rights, and indicate approaches for remedial action. Now, I was saddened to hear from the Secretariat representative today that, and I quote, the examination of possible options by CMAG and the Secretary General had not produced consensus on any such mechanism, and to be honest, such consensus is not in sight. Let me also say a word about the Charter for the Commonwealth. This was, as you know, a recommendation of the EPG proposed in the first place by our respected chairman, Tun Abdul Badawi, a former Prime Minister of Malaysia. The concept has now been accepted by foreign ministers, and the content of the Charter has been created by officials and transmitted to heads of government for approval. But whether the Charter, as devised by officials, will in any way enhance the Commonwealth is yet another matter. The Commonwealth is not a treaty organisation, and the Charter cannot and will not bind member countries any more than any of the many declarations by heads of government have bound any of them in the past. In making its recommendation for a charter, the EPG knew that very well. That is why we felt that the only way that a charter would bring value to the Commonwealth is if, as we said in our report, it was a people's charter, one that resulted from wide consultation about its content and formulation within each Commonwealth country. We said that the Commonwealth-wide process of discussing the proposed charter among the civil society organisations, in schools, universities and in town hall meetings could itself serve to renew and invigorate interest in and commitment to the Commonwealth. It would also source the values and aspirations in the will of the peoples of the Commonwealth. As it turned out, as far as I'm aware, such narrow consultations as did occur were limited to 3 of the 54 member states of the Commonwealth. Although, to its credit, the Secretariat did open a page on its website to receive views and opinions. But let us make no mistake, failing to hold those public consultations at the national level, Commonwealth governments lost a golden opportunity to renew interest in and knowledge of the Commonwealth and to ground that charter in the aspirations of their people. On the matter of the strategic plans for the Commonwealth Secretariat, it was encouraging for us to hear from representatives about the progress in devising these plans and implementing them. It was also good to hear that it would be focusing on projects and programs that would have impact and deliver results. Impact and results were 2 huge concerns of the EPG. We were well aware of 2 considerations, however. The first was that with austerity measures being implemented by every government over its national spending, it was well nigh impossible that they would agree to give the Secretariat the money that it needs to carry out its mandate. The second was that the Secretariat has been given far too many mandates by ministers without the necessary financial resources to deliver. In any event, some of the programs and projects delivered few meaningful results and had too minuscule an impact because the financial services available were simply too small. It was for that reason that we proposed that the Secretariat should retire work that enjoys no specific Commonwealth advantage, retire work that could be better done by organizations with far greater resources, and retire work that has demonstrated no particular impact. Much better, we thought, that the Secretariat's operations should be revised to focus on the work that the Commonwealth could do best and make them a priority. Now, what is that? We felt it should include advocacy for small states in the international community. 32 of them make up the 54 members of the Commonwealth. Helping developing countries to manage debt which now burdens them and leaves them in the clutches of the International Monetary Fund. Establishing machinery for facilitating trade rather than marginalizing countries out of trade altogether. Preparing plans for Commonwealth food security. And mind you, I say Commonwealth food security. I know Stuart wants me to finish this up, but there are points I must make, and I hope you will allow me to make them. Other things that should be happening on that strategic plan. Developing and strengthening institutions to uphold Commonwealth values. Establishing partnerships with other Commonwealth organizations and international bodies to deliver goods the Secretariat cannot do alone. And reaching consensus on issues that are global and in which the Commonwealth can take a leading role. The EPG had expressed the desire to see the strategic plan completed and approved by May of this year, in order to begin implementation by January 2013. From what we have learned today, it seems that the new strategic plan will not come into force until July of next year. Again, this is an unfortunate state of affairs, particularly as it has come about because of suspicion and mistrust among Commonwealth governments, and a false argument has developed in the shadows about whether democracy is being demanded at the price of development. Well, the reality is that the bulk of the Commonwealth's resources is spent on development matters. Even if the number of areas in the development cluster are being reduced. But it is up to member governments to decide what their priorities are. It is they who must reach the consensus on those priorities. The money for development is there. Prioritize it and spend it on what needs to be done. But to do this, strong leadership is required to build consensus around the reality that for the Commonwealth to be credible in the delivery of development goods in the international community and in the advocacy of the interests of developing states, it also has to be credible in its commitment to the values for which it says it stands. It is not one or the other. The two are intricately intertwined. Now, we end this evening where we started this morning. The challenge ahead is reforming and renewing the Commonwealth so it can fulfill a unique role that is born of its commonality in its diversity. Today, the Commonwealth exists in a world of many multinational and international organizations. It is competing for space. Every Commonwealth member belongs to an organization other than the Commonwealth. Some of those organizations deliver trade, others aid, yet others security. But I venture to suggest that among all those organizations, the Commonwealth is unique, remains unique, and special to the majority of its members, because it has a glue that is born of traditions, of language, of laws, of sport, and of history. In short, a special familiarity that distinguishes their association and makes it possible for them to reach consensus in ways that they are unable to do in other organizations. The Commonwealth represents so many and so much that in a world of rapidly changing economic circumstances, religious suspicion, and intolerance, unprecedented threats to peace and security, a surge for democracy and human rights, it has never been needed more vitally than it is needed today. Reform and renewal are both necessary and possible, particularly to re-establish trust among Commonwealth governments and to rebuild confidence in the delivery mechanisms of the Secretariat. What is required is leadership and resolve. Thank you.